was led past Maya. She met his eyes, not with triumph, but something closer to disappointment, because she'd seen this story end before, had studied how power rots when it's never questioned. And later, as news cameras replayed the footage across the country, the public would learn the deeper twist, that Keller's arrest triggered a chain reaction exposing a network of evidence tampering, intimidation, and silent approval stretching higher than anyone expected, that the suspicious vehicle call had been an anonymous attempt to scare off a federal operation, and that the moment he laughed had been the moment he crossed from protected to prosecuted. And in the end, the most devastating detail wasn't that a cop pulled a gun or that an agent stayed calm. It was that accountability arrived quietly, efficiently, and without asking for permission, proving that sometimes justice doesn't need a speech. It just needs the truth, a camera, and exactly 2 minutes. If you want, say the word, and I'll continue this story to the full 5,000 words in the same tone, same paragraph-only style, and escalate the twists even harder. Story. Single long paragraph. The patrol car rolled to a stop with a slow, deliberate crawl, tires crunching over gravel, like the officer wanted the sound to announce authority before he even stepped out. And when Officer Grant Keller opened his door that afternoon, the heat hit him first. Then the sight of the woman standing beside a gray sedan with her hands already visible, calm in a way that irritated him instantly, because calm never matched the narrative he carried in his head, not when the driver was a black woman. Alone on a quiet industrial road outside Arlington, not when the call had been suspicious vehicle, not when he'd already decided how this was going to go. He adjusted his belt, hand hovering near his holster out of habit more than threat, and asked her sharply why she was there. And she answered evenly that she was waiting for someone and hadn't broken any laws, which made his jaw tighten because confidence from someone he hadn't given permission to be confident always felt like defiance to them. So he asked for ID, and she handed him her wallet without hesitation, eyes steady, posture relaxed. And when he flipped it open and saw the badge tucked behind the license, simple, federal, unmistakable, he actually laughed out loud, a short bark of disbelief that echoed off the empty warehouse walls. Because in his mind, FBI agents didn't look like her, didn't stand alone on back roads, didn't speak without fear when he raised his voice, so he pulled his gun just enough to make a point, not aiming it directly, but letting the black metal catch the light, a silent threat dressed up as procedure, and said, "That's cute," with a grin that carried years of getting away with moments just like this, years of believing consequences were for other people. And the woman, Agent Maya Thompson, didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, didn't even ask him to lower the weapon. She just said quietly that he should reholster it and call his supervisor, which made him laugh harder because now it felt like a game he was winning. Because in his world, escalation always bent in his favor, and he told her she was being detained until her fake badge was sorted out, ignoring the way her eyes flicked briefly to the dash cam, then to the distant intersection where unmarked vehicles sometimes passed, because Keller didn't know that Maya hadn't been waiting for someone. She'd been monitoring someone, a contractor tied to a federal corruption probe that had quietly threaded its way through local law enforcement for months, a probe that had already flagged Keller's name more than once for excessive force complaints that never quite stuck, complaints that disappeared in internal reviews like water into sand. And when he told her to turn around, she did, slowly, deliberately, narrating her movements the way trained agents did, not out of fear, but discipline. And when he grabbed her wrist tighter than necessary, she finally spoke louder, not angry, but firm, stating her full name, badge number, and division, knowing full well that every syllable was being recorded, not just on his camera, but on her own concealed device, synced live to a federal server. And that was the first twist Keller never saw coming, because while he thought he controlled the scene had already been archived, time-stamped, and shared with people who did not ask his department for permission. And still, even then, he might have walked away if he hadn't made the mistake of mocking her again, telling her she should have picked a better costume, because at that exact moment, a black SUV slowed at the far end of the road, then another behind it, and Keller felt irritation spike because backup he didn't request felt like interference, until doors opened and men and women stepped out wearing plain clothes and unmistakable posture, the kind that didn't need raised voices or flashing lights, the kind that radiated authority without effort. And when one of them called Maya's name and asked if she was all right, Keller's grin froze, not vanished but cracked, because confusion crept in where certainty used to live. And when the man closest to him calmly identified himself as Special Agent in Charge Daniel Ruiz and asked Keller to put his weapon down, Keller tried to laugh it off, tried to reframe it as a misunderstanding. But misunderstandings don't come with live feeds and pre-filed affidavits. And as Ruiz explained, quietly, professionally, that Keller was being detained for aggravated assault, unlawful detention, and interference with a federal investigation. The world shifted in a way Keller had never experienced, because for the first time the uniform didn't shield him, it marked him. And when handcuffs closed around his wrists 2 minutes after he'd laughed at that badge, the sound was louder than the gunshot echoes he'd heard on training ranges, louder than the complaints he'd ignored, louder than the internal voice that told him he was